everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to get started in a few minutes. I'm Lauren Hobbs from Vivvi, and this is Jen from The Loved Child.
It's great to be here today. I hope everyone sees that we've dropped a toilet training quiz right into the chat. So even though our brains aren't great at double tasking, just take a minute. There's just 7 quick questions. It will be very helpful as I share information today.
And then I'm also going to drop in a worksheet, list of resources that we'll share after the panel. But if you want to take notes on it while we're going, that is also a great thing to have. So I'll drop in that link as well.
So Lauren.
Yes.
Great. Should we start up or you want to
I think let's give it a couple minutes because it's just 12. So let's give it 2 minutes. And if people, if attendees, as you come in, it would be great to have a sense of where you're coming from. So if you want to share your location, where you live, and the name and the age of your child, that would be really great for us to have so we can tailor the talk as we go along. And for anyone who has just joined, we have a couple links already in the chat. One is a resource guide and a place to take notes if you would like. That's the first link. You go all the way up. And then the second one is a very short quiz that Jen has shared with us in case you're wondering. We had many questions about when to start potty training. And so if you're wondering about that and you'd like to take a very short quiz, we're going to cover sort of the results of that quiz later in the session to give you a better sense of when to start potty training.
So we've got 2 2.5-year-olds and an 18-month-old, any age that's appropriate to be here. Turning 6 in December. Awesome. Welcome.
I have an almost 3-year-old. We're struggling with potty training at night. My son is very confident right now. Okay, great. All stages. Okay, great. Well, I think we've reached at least a little bit of a quorum. So let's get started. We're so happy to welcome you today. I'm really thrilled to be here with Jen. And as I mentioned, I'm Lauren Hobbs. I'm the head of brand at Vivvi. Many of you, if you've been to a talk with us before, are used to seeing Gretchen, our head of family experience. She and I work very closely together. I'm taking over here for her today. I am a mom of 5-year-old, almost 6-year-old daughter and an almost 3-year-old son. So I'm very eager to hear, he's about half potty trained. So I'm very eager to hear Jen's ongoing lessons about this. And if you weren't already familiar with Vivvi, we are on a mission to reinvent childcare and early learning for today's families. And actually, Jen, if you want to go to the next slide, this just sort of gives an intro, shows both of us.
Sure.
So we're reinventing childcare and early learning for today's families, and we're doing that in a few different ways. So in New York, our 3 campuses specialize in childcare and early learning for ages 6 weeks to 5 years. And then nationally, our in-home program, which takes our teachers and everything about the school model and places it inside your home. And that expands coverage to meet families where you are. So before we get started, I wanted to share just a few program logistics and then we'll dive in. So we have an hour together. Jen and I are going to use the first 45 minutes based on these wonderful submissions by you. We'll look at her programming, which she has done many, many times over. And then we'll head over to the chat function for the last 15 minutes and use the rest of the time to answer as many live questions as possible. So that said, obviously the chat function is open now. So please put questions in there and we'll do our best to interject. So we're so lucky to have Jen joining us today, who's run workshops like this many, many times over in her work as the founder of an organization called The Loved Child. She's based in Boston, and The Loved Child aims to support parents across work and life, which is very similar to Vivvi's mission. And we met Jen a few months ago and began planning to team up for a few of these workshops. So we have an upcoming sleep workshop that you can check out, also applicable for all the ages of sleep issues in about a month. So as everyone here knows, there are many, many different schools of thought and individual situations when it comes to potty training and frankly, every other aspect of parenting. So this talk could probably literally go on for hours, but what we're going to aim to do is not only give you an overview of the process and methodology, but also just some really actionable tips and follow-up resources so you feel empowered, a little bit more empowered after this to either start, continue, or reset whatever journey you're on as a family and with your child. The other thing that I'll emphasize is that we just saw so much overlap in the questions everyone asked here, which is really always, I think, comforting to know. At Vivvi, we often remind each other not to worry alone. And I can say with confidence that by showing up to this hour and being here and learning from Jen, you are doing just that. So we just want to say a huge thank you for being here. And let's get started. If you haven't already, it would be great to introduce yourself in the chat with the age of your child and where you're dialing in from. And then there are two, if you scroll up in the chat, I put two links. One is for a resources worksheet where you're welcome to take notes or reference it later. There's books and a few other resources. And then another for a very short quiz that Jen is going to cover in kind of assessing when your child is ready to start potty training. So that's another great resource. So Jen, I'm going to turn it over mostly to you and I'll interject with some questions and we'll learn a lot in the next hour.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and really all the folks at Vivvi. It's just wonderful to be here. I think a good place to begin is to share that I am a mother. First and foremost, I'm walking the talk. My babies are now 16, 18, and 18. And I just want everyone to know who's present today, all three of them are toilet trained. So just keep that in mind. I just thought I'd add that in. Professionally, as Lauren shared, I am a child development behavior and parenting specialist. And you're going to figure out how old I am shortly. I've been doing this work in the Boston area for about 28 years now. You're going to see on this next slide, we've got a busy next 45 minutes. Friends and family often ask me, Jennifer, why do you enjoy talking to families about poo and pee? And to be honest, I love this topic. There are many topics I can speak to, but this is really one of my favorites. And why is that? Well, this is probably one of the first times in your parenting journey that you're recognizing how autonomous this little person is. And that can be a little anxiety provoking for some parents, that you realize that, whoa, I'm not sure how much control I have in this job of parenting. The other reason I love the topic of toilet teaching is it's, again, the first time that perhaps you can integrate child development and behavior and temperament theory. And I'm going to be talking about that shortly. And then the third reason is I don't see this just about toilet teaching today. what I'm really hoping to do is share with you through my developmental lens, sort of a new way of approaching parenting, so that we're not going to be focused so much on controlling our children. Rather, we're going to be focused on how we can respond best and supporting them. So toilet training is just an awesome way to practice those skills. What I would love everybody to do right now is just go ahead and in the chat function, drop in what in your household you guys call number 1 and number 2. I love to ask that question when I'm in person, because it gets everybody giggling. It's a nice way to make everyone feel comfortable. So just do that, drop them in there. I'm going to keep going. And as a reminder, Lauren also dropped in the quiz, and it would be really helpful if you just take the couple minutes to quickly fill that out. Okay, so this is what we're going to hopefully cover today. We're going to start here. Respect. As you're dropping in what you're calling number 1 and number 2 in your home, I want to let you know from a professional viewpoint, it doesn't matter to me what you're calling number 1 and number 2. I've heard it all. What's important to me is that you are consistent with what you are calling number 1 and number 2. So if you're going to say, do you need to tinkle, which by the way, we're going to be talking about that question very shortly, you're always going to use the word tinkle or poop or BM. So that is a must. Number 2, there are a lot of people in my profession that would say it is really important that you use the formal labels for your children's body parts. So using the correct names. And again, you're going to be consistent with that too. And then the third thing I want to say, this is so important, is that we are positive in our language around potty training, meaning we've all been there. You're changing a poopy diaper. You wish that you had your, pandemic mask on, and you're making, wrinkling your face and making sounds. This is not very helpful for this little person. We want them to feel comfortable with all that they do. So instead of using so stinky or ugh, so dirty, messy, how about things like, oh gosh, it feels so good to have on a dry diaper. Let's put on fresh, clean undies. And then the other thing I want to bring up before we get going today is we all know, you've talked to friends and families. There are, in fact, on Amazon, I just checked, it used to be 6,000 books on potty training. It's now up to 10,000.
Wow.
Okay. That is, tells us something.
There's a lot of people curious about it. Yes, everyone's struggling.
Well, Lauren, as I always say, I'm in the right line of work, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There isn't one way to go about this. So we're going to put aside the things that we've heard. In this country, they potty train by 6 months. My grandmother potty trained me in 1 day. Rather, we're going to focus on a very strong belief of mine that every child is unique and therefore deserves his or her own individualized plan. Today, I am not going to be focused on elimination communication or the natural infant hygiene. And I'm only going to be focusing on daytime dryness, okay, or daytime learning. Why is that? Nighttime learning is a separate process. Don't worry, Lauren, we will get to your question about your little guy, but I just want folks to know that we're going to first focus on daytime dryness. And in fact, just so you know, developmentally, we won't even expect our little ones to be nighttime dry until the ages of between 5 and 7. I hope that makes you feel better, Lauren.
Yeah, no, I think that is, and I meant to say earlier too, I mean, I have 2 children. The first is a girl, the second is a boy. And so it's just been so interesting to watch, even in our own journey as a family, like much easier with our daughter, a little bit more, longer of a process with our son. And, to your point, every child is so different. And whether it's a girl or a boy, or it's second or first or what have you, there's so many factors. So I completely agree around, it takes a different process for each child, and they're just ready at different times. So case study of one over here, but you have case studies of many, many more than that. So
Exactly.
yeah, I'm trying to give myself a break in the midst of changing sheets every single morning.
Well, and as you know, Lauren, as I always say, that saying, yes, your child is going to go off to college, wearing his or her own underwear and knowing how to use the bathroom. I say even going off to kindergarten. So the one thing that is consistent with all children is that they deserve a plan that is very consistent, and caregivers, parents that can be very patient. So this is when you take 4 deep belly breaths in those moments.
Yeah.
So
let's great. So let's jump in.
This is a very important and near and dear to my heart, this topic. So what is temperament if you're not familiar with it? Temperament refers to a person's individualized behavioral style, how he or she responds to the world and those around him or her. Why do I need to bring this up? Here are the 9 traits of temperament. This is a whole workshop in itself, but in terms of toilet training, you can probably see immediately that many of these traits are going to very much influence how your little person does with independent toilet learning. I'm just going to grab one in the best interest of time. Think about regularity. If you have a little person at home that gets hungry at the same time every day, tends to have a very regular sleep pattern, well, perhaps with toilet teaching, that little person is going to be perhaps a little bit easier and will adapt to the new routine in the house in terms of when we're asking this little person to try using the potty. So any single topic that I address, I like to share a temperament survey so that the parents are familiar with those 9 traits. And I go over this concept of goodness of fit between the caregiver parent and the child. So just like all relationships, there are going to be times that your temperament trait is going to work well with your little person, and there are times that it's just not. So we call that good.
I think this is also interesting for first-time parents, because I remember, and we have many first-time parents here, I think. And I think when you are a first-time parent, you don't, yes, there's some warning signs, but at the same time, many of these children are just learning how to talk. They're just expressing that version of themselves. And so you might know if your child is on one extreme or the other, but it might be helpful to just talk briefly about, some of those warning signs around, and maybe this quiz, or if we can share a link to this sheet afterwards. But I think sometimes that can be a little intimidating to know, like, if you have nothing to compare it to. Who is your, this is exactly the time when they're starting to become that person.
Yeah, I would love to share this temperament survey with the whole Vivvi community, teachers,
Great,
caregivers, and parents. I think like a lot of surveys and quizzes and assessments, just the process of completing it can be very empowering, not only to learn about your little person, but also yourself. So I'd love to share this temperament survey. And what we did with my own mothering is that we completed it separately with from my husband. And then we stuck the survey away in a kitchen drawer and would come back to it. And the thought is that a lot of these temperament traits do hold true over time. So it is a fascinating area of child development and behavior.
Okay, great. But I think takeaway, like, this matching of a different approach per different type of child. Yes. I am also a big believer that every parent is the expert of his or her own child. So being familiar with these traits is just going to help you so much, not just around toilet training, but perhaps around limit setting or starting a new school. Probably the biggest reason, Lauren, I bring up temperament is, I don't know about you guys, but as a mom, as a parent, we're walking around with so much guilt on our shoulders. So just realizing that your child is bringing so much to this world as just who they are as an individual, and just to let go of some of that blame. What am I doing wrong? So much is just who this little person is. So there's my spiel on temperament. I think we're now ready to go into some toilet teaching facts. I'm going to be mentioning a bunch of statistics and numbers, just a nice way to have some information as a foundation here. So it's going to take anywhere, and notice the range, between 3 to 12 months for your child to use the toilet independently, okay? And again, I'm just talking about daytime dryness. Studies have shown, at least in the United States, that the average age for toilet training is between, again, another range, 2 to 4 years. Most toddlers urinate about, another range, 4 to 8 times a day. And this is going to be important to know shortly when I talk about the potty bell approach. This I find fascinating. A child's bladder is quite small. Sometimes we forget that for parents. So for a 1.5-year-old, he or she can only hold about 1 to 1.5 ounces of fluid. A 2-year-old, about 2 to 2.5 ounces of fluid. Why am I sharing this? It's interesting. Tiny amount.
Yeah. I mean, think of a bottle. Why am I sharing this? Let's use this in our favor, parents. When you begin this process in earnest, increase the fluids in your child's diet. We want them to have that sensation of a full bladder. Pooping, let's get right to it. Children, this is so varied. Some kids poop 1 time a day. Some kids poop 5 times a day. Some kids poop 1 time a week. What I recommend, and I know a lot of pediatricians do, increase their fiber when you begin this process in earnest. Well, I would say always increase their fiber, but especially if you're really trying to set them up for success around independent toilet learning. 30% of kids between the ages of 2 to 10 are chronically constipated. I find that to be a very high number. And about 3 to 5% of doctors' visits are around constipation. So again, increase fiber. All right. 80%, this is so important. 80% of children experience setbacks in toilet training. 80%. So we learn from our accidents. It's okay if children need to take breaks. Think about that. 8 in 10 children.
There was a lot of questions from the audience about, I started, they seemed interested, we're stopped, or now I'm not, seems like we're not doing anything, or, any kind of environmental change, I think, can affect that as well.
And we could talk about this for days. Could be so much about control, right? This is one thing in their lives that's spinning around them that they have the power if they're going to poop or if they're going to pee. So anybody that's here today that's worried about those regressions, you're in the norm, 8 out of 10 children. So just a couple more, 98% of children are completely daytime dry by the age of 4. And then we find that within about 6 months of daytime dryness, these little ones are also nighttime dry. I want to bring up one more statistic that I just learned about, I don't know, a couple years ago. I thought it was fascinating. Those days when you were little and your parents would say, okay, use the bathroom before we get in the car. Guess what? Kids 4 and under cannot just empty their bladder on command unless it's full. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, very, yeah.
So if your child's bladder is not full, ask them repeatedly to use the potty before they go off to Vivvi.
Right.
It's not going to work.
Concept. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought you guys would find that interesting. Okay, so now
guilty as charged.
The quiz is in the chat. Everyone knows. What I'm going to very quickly do as a developmentalist is run through the areas of, well, all areas of development are important in toilet learning, but just so folks can have a better sense, hey, is it time, or should I wait a little bit longer? I hope this will be helpful. Physiologically, this is fascinating. So babies up to about 18 months are not yet able to control the muscles, they're called the sphincter muscles, that keep the bladder and the rectum closed. So what happens with these little ones, as the stomach fills, fluids pass to the bladder, those muscles relax, and then urination or bowel movement occurs. So as a developmentalist, I'm going to recommend to folks out there, if your little person does not yet have control of that sphincter muscle, let's hold off. I know someone out there is, hey, Jennifer, how do I know if my child has control over the sphincter muscles? You know, that's a little person that hides under the kitchen table, or goes behind the couch, or maybe even holds on to his or her diaper, or maybe even has the expressive language to say, Dad, I'm peeing right now. That is a sign that your child is physiologically ready to begin this process in earnest. Is that, Lauren, helpful for folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think at least in my own experience, we started our son on the earlier side because it seemed like he could be, and then realized after one day of, minimal diaper outside, he had no care in the world about when he was peeing, no acknowledgement whatsoever. And we sort of said, okay, not ready, another couple months. So I do think it's interesting to, if you're not sure, that was our method. I don't know if you can share a couple other just like little, tips or tricks around. I mean, I think the hiding behind the couch, or little signs that that your child is ready, but also go into maybe a first try with a lot of grace for yourself and your child, knowing that it might not remotely stick. So, try for a day or two and be fine with, okay, now it's not the time.
Exactly. And that's why I just keep bringing up that statistic, that there's going to be some starts and stops depending on your child's temperament. One of those traits down on the bottom of the list was persistence. So
Mhm.
there's some kids, you begin this process, and my gosh, my eldest was that way, and he's that way to this day.
Mhm.
Once he starts something, it's 110%, and he keeps going. We use the same potty bell technique with with all kids, but with our third, it took our third a year. So it's just very,
Yeah.
very temperament dependent. In terms of these other areas of development, just real quickly, physical readiness, it's really interesting to back up to a potty or to a toilet. You need to know how to walk backwards. So I
Mm.
always ask parents when I'm supporting them, hey, does your little one walk backwards yet? And I'd like at this point to remind parents to set your children up for success in terms of the clothing that you're putting on your kids during this process. I love elastic waistbands,
Yeah.
skirts. Let's stay away from overalls,
Yeah.
buttons and zippers, the fine motor control. We don't have a lot of time here, and we want to set these kids up. Some of
Yeah.
us really don't like to have accidents.
Yeah, and I think this is a big tip. There was a question about how best to, and I think we'll get into this further down the line too, but for that topic specifically, how best to partner with your daycare or school on these, or teachers or caregivers or even spouse or grandparents, whomever is doing potty training with you as a team, how best to partner with them. And I think accessible clothing is a huge one for that. I know I get notes from our son's school.
You know what, Lauren?
Because it's also the age of independence. They want to be able to start thinking about dressing themselves or pulling up or pulling down. And
which brings me to social emotional development. That's one of the readiness sides, is we want to see this toddler, me do it. We want to see them interested in imitating their peers. That is such a great sign for us parents and caregivers that perhaps our child is ready.
Yeah.
Lauren, to get right to it, when parents ask me about, well, what do I do about Monday through Friday and my son is off at preschool or a childcare setting, one of the great things about children is they're very resilient, and they're good at, this is the plan that we have at home, and this is the plan that we have at school. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't talk to your care provider. Of course, please do, and share with what your routine is at home. But I wouldn't want anybody to think, I'm not going to start until next summer when my daughter's going to be home the entire summer with us, for example. Kids are really good at knowing, this is what I do at school and this is what I do at home.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said for aspects of things that they can learn within a group setting or with someone who's not their parent, that's perhaps taking them to the next level, and then they're bringing home new things from their day too. So it can go both ways.
Exactly. So in terms of time, I'm going to just quickly go through cognitive development. I mean, there are times when I'm going over this with parents, I think, well, good job, Jennifer, for using the potty today. It takes a lot of cognitive power to problem solve, to understand cause and effect. I need to get around that table to get into that bathroom. I need to be able to memorize a sequence of events. So it really does take a lot for these little people. So back to consistency is key. We want to keep things very predictable for these little people. Emotional readiness, we talked about, we want to see them wanting to be autonomous, in charge of their own bodies. Language, remember, we break language into expressive language and receptive. It sure is helpful if your child understands a bunch of potty vocabulary, and great if your little person can even let you know expressively that they need to use the potty. Probably the most important thing to bring up on this slide is family readiness. So let me get right to this. We don't recommend training. Again, every family is unique, but if it is a stressful time for your family, if you cannot be consistent in this new routine, maybe there's a baby due soon, or maybe you've recently moved, or maybe your child has just started a new childcare center or preschool, or maybe you and your co-parent are just not in a great place right now. Your little one is experiencing a lot of nightmares at night. Or I always giggle when I say this because we're talking about toddlers and preschoolers. Maybe your little person is just in kind of a negative place, right?
I don't know who can relate to that.
Right, exactly. So that quiz that's in the chat, here are the answers. It's pretty darn easy. If most of the answers are A, you're going to wait. If most of the answers are B, it's time for pre-potty training. And then if most of the answers are C, you guys are ready and really have your listening ears on for that potty bell technique that I'm going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Shortly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think, again, for the first time parents or, people who are partnering with either a school or a daycare, if you answer those questions and you think you have a sense for yourself, use those resources, use your teachers, use your heads of school, because they've seen many, many children and they know the dynamic within the classroom, and, sort of say, I think we're ready to start with this child. What do you think? And how do we start together?
And I love that you can even literally walk in with that quiz. By the way, the quiz, if you look at it again, after I just went over the areas of child development, that's exactly what the quiz is doing. It's just going through each area of development. This is probably the easiest part of supporting your little person around independent toilet using. And probably a phrase that is well respected at Vivvi is less is more in the world of child development and behavior. Okay, less is more. What do I mean by that? You can go into a store, you can go on Amazon, and you can get potty chairs that have blinking lights, that sing to you, that move. I need to bring a little humor into this. Please, the less is more. Why? This is mom talking to you guys right now. You're going to be cleaning these a lot. The fewer little crevices and such, the better. How many of these little pieces of equipment do you need? I like in a bathroom that a child has the choice between two. I'm holding up my fingers. We're going to get to the power of choices. So perhaps in your bathroom, you have a little child-sized potty, and then you've got the grown-up toilet with a ring. Lauren, the most important thing on this slide is the picture of the step stool. That little one,
that's a great point,
to go poop, needs to have his or her feet firmly planted on that step stool. And then these weren't around when we were training our kids, but a travel potty can also be very, very helpful when you're out and about.
I can attest to that.
Yeah, right. That fits right into your diaper.
And what do you think about, I know we got this advice at the beginning of our sort of journey with this. What do you think about getting some of these things, or one at least, before your child is ready, just to sort of normalize it? Like, I know my son spent like 6 months carrying around his potty before he was remotely thinking about it, just because we already had it.
Remember our blue potty, it stored board books before it was put to use. So sure, to have these things out and about. Now, I do recommend, again, cognitive, I do like the idea of these things being in the bathroom, so that your little person is starting to make that association. And maybe I'll just bring this up now before I forget. another wonderful thing, if you're comfortable, every family is different. If you're comfortable letting your child observe you using the bathroom, that can also be very helpful. This isn't for everybody, but if you are, the power of social psychology, being able to model peers and other, the parents can be.
Well, and I think this gets back to where we started about temperament and understanding your own comfort. And, even many adults have different thoughts and, sometimes challenges around, I don't like to go to the bathroom outside of my own home, or I don't love, especially amidst COVID, I don't love going to the bathroom in public places, et cetera. And just understanding that, we are, for better or worse, our child's mostly only example in these early years. And so understanding, I think, your own parameters around what you're comfortable with and not, and just recognizing that you're, passing that along can be a really powerful thing.
I couldn't agree more. In terms of, equipment, that's easy. By the way, feel free to get onto your Facebook community groups and such. I often recommend, people are constantly giving away these kind of things. You can stick it in your dishwasher. It's just plastic, scrub them down, and they can be used again. So we're not filling up more landfills. I'll tell you, the diapers, the pull-ups, the undies, we could talk 2 hours about just this.
And I want to get to the approach because I know people are eagerly waiting.
So in terms of consistency is my my hope here. Let me say though, please hold off on the character undies, the Thomas the Tank, the princess, the dragon undies. Start with the thick cotton training pants. 8 out of 10 kids have regressions, so we want to make sure that we have some things in our back pocket. Okay, so let's, in the interest of time, let's get to go. I'm going to strongly recommend that no matter how you did on that quiz today, we want to do as much as we can in the bathroom pertaining to cleaning a child up. So if possible, you can even start changing diapers in the bathroom. The most important message today is we're not going to ask our children if they need to use the toilet. If they want to, we're going to put our shoulders back and we're, our eyes gleaming. It's time to use the potty. Do you want to go upstairs or do you want to go downstairs? Do you want to use the blue potty or do you want to use daddy's potty? Do you want to fly like a dragon or do you want to hop like a frog? Point being, you are in charge in terms of declaring that it's time to visit the bathroom. So the daytime routine is pretty darn simple. You're going to be visiting the bathroom because now we know how often little people need to go. So about every hour and a half to 2 hours. And this little person is going to be given 2 choices in terms of where they're going to attempt to go to the bathroom. And we are not going to focus on jumping up and down with glee when we see the pee. Gosh, that worked out well. Rather, we're going to be enthusiastic that they are attempting to join into this new routine and try. That's very important because depending on their temperament style, if you start jumping up and down and clapping when there's one little drop of pee in that potty, for some children, that's going to shut them down. That's just too much pressure to succeed. So does that make sense?
It does. I think it's worth saying that that's so hard to do because as a parent, you're obviously focused on this as a quote unquote milestone. You're focused on, success, blah, blah, blah. All of these things are so ingrained in us. And so to go and just realize that you're going to set up the structure and not think about the result, I personally find extremely difficult, but I think it makes so much sense. And so much of what I think children respond to in not only a school setting, but we're constantly saying, talking about this at home too, is just structure and those boundaries and guidelines for them to then express themselves however they want within those guidelines. And the idea that you're in charge of setting up these parameters and then they're in charge of their own body is such a helpful thing, and hard. So I think, writing that down, and I recently saw a nutrition workshop around a similar thing, around separating out what your child is in charge of and what you're in charge of, and sort of before you even start, probably just thinking about your role and sticking to your lane, because I think that's very challenging. But this is great. Let's
good. Well, I'm
go
glad
on.
that, but yeah, so in that daytime routine, you're really focused on the child's willingness to participate in this new routine. Now, as I said at the beginning of this session, nighttime, they're going to be back in either, if they're sleeping in a pull-up or in a diaper, until you have about plus or minus 2 weeks of a morning diaper or pull-up that's dry. Okay.
Yeah.
What I want to do now is we're getting more and more specific. So anybody that's here today, you can start this toilet training process. But maybe when they're done washing their hands after attempting to go on either the blue potty or on daddy's toilet, you can have them either wearing a diaper or a pull-up. In fact, why don't you give them a choice? Now, though, we're into this next section, meaning if you on the quiz learned your kid is ready, I want to share very briefly the potty bell approach. It really works well with children of all different temperament styles. So what you're going to do, let's start in the morning. Your little person gets up. The first thing, like a lot of adults, we're going to go right into the bathroom and we're going to give choices. Do you want to take off your pajamas or do you want daddy to take off your pajamas? That little person is going to make a choice sitting on either the toilet or the child-sized potty. Of course, we're going to be washing our hands afterwards. And then, hey, do you want to wear the green undies today or the blue undies? Or maybe the green undies and your birthday suit, nothing at all, can also be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question, because I know that, there's so many methods where, and I think our, previous generations, like, okay, wait until summer and then just take off their diaper and see what happens.
Yeah.
So let's pause on that for a second and sort of say how this is different.
So if you are going to be around the house, like maybe you're starting this potty bell, like, because I do love the idea of planning ahead. So okay, we've got a long weekend coming up. We're going to start this potty bell technique. If your little person, and there are lots of them out there, enjoys being in the home, playing, etc., without any clothes on, I love this. Cognitively, it's going to help them be so much more in touch with their body. So that's totally fine. Now, if you're going out and about, perhaps you're going to want to give them the choice between the green undies or the blue undies. And again, I'm recommending the thick cotton underwear.
Yeah.
Then the next part, Lauren, is very simple. You're going to set a ticking timer. So not on your smartphone. I'm talking about a timer that a little person can hear.
Mhm.
And that timer is going to go off initially until you know your child's patterns about every hour to hour and a half. The bell goes off. Sam, it's time to use the potty. Not, Sam, do you need to use the potty? Do you want to use the potty? And we visit a potty. We attempt to go to the bathroom. The praise, the reward is for the attempt.
Yeah.
We rinse and repeat. What if there's accidents? We very calmly take a deep breath. You're going to set up your house for success, meaning roll up those oriental rugs that you got from your grandmother.
Yeah.
Set up the house so that it's not going to be too frustrating. There going to be accidents. There's not a method out there that there aren't accidents that are part of the learning process.
Yeah. And as far as rewards, because I think a lot of people have questions about this too.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Let's
Great.
talk about rewards. So this is really interesting, Lauren.
And I know I'm conscious of that we have 10 minutes left. So if people do have questions as we go, Jen and I can obviously keep talking and talking, but please start putting questions in the chat and we'll work them in, or we'll just pause this and go to the questions.
Great. Yeah, let me, I do want to very quickly, because again, a lot of what I'm talking about today is not just about toilet training, it's also about parenting in general.
Yes.
The difference between using token rewards, that's like the stickers and you do this and you get that, compared to praise. So when I'm working with a family, I always recommend to start with the power of praise, praising the attempt to go potty. That being said, if you didn't hear what I just said, 80% of parents use rewards in toilet training. All I ask is that, yeah, I know, is that you don't use food. I know M&Ms are often, we really like, my colleagues strongly feel that we do not pair food with rewards, with good behavior. So yes, there's sticker charts and such that can be very powerful for some children.
Mm-hmm.
But why not start with the power of praise and then move into, and I'm going to just quickly list off a bunch of tips that can be helpful, very creative things that I have learned from families over the years. So a countdown calendar, letting your little one know that in a week, we're going to begin this new potty bell technique. Putting together a photo shoot of your little person. So taking pictures of your child, so the model in each phase of this routine. So standing there in pajamas, sitting there on the toilet, washing hands. So this little person can look over and see him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
No clothes, we talked about. Going with your child's quirks. If your little one wants to be on all fours on top of the toilet, that's fine. Scheduled play dates. I know we've got a pandemic going on, but that can be very powerful. Putting Cheerios into the potty, putting food coloring into the potty, letting your little one attempt to pee on that. Being clever around how to get your child. That potty bell goes off. Do you want to fly like an airplane or do you want to hop like a rabbit?
And this is a good question. So Amy has a question. What do you do when your child is refusing to use the potty? He won't stay without a diaper and cries until I put one on. And I definitely had that experience. So I'm curious about that.
Amy, great question. So if you're getting, I always need two hands for this. If you're getting this sensation in terms of potty training and the routine, I strongly recommend that you take a break. Now, a break might be 3 days, it may be 5 days, it might be 2 months. It really depends on the child. This is not going to work in toilet training. What can happen, as I brought up in the beginning of the session, that's when constipation, holding pee, we don't need that to happen. This is something in our parenting journey. We know this little one is going to be potty trained and independent. So it needs to feel like this. So you're going to pause and you're going to come back in a creative way and involve your little person in the process. So for example, that countdown calendar, maybe coming up with a reward system. What moves your child? There's a technique.
And how long would you recommend waiting? Like from a psychology point of view for the child, is 2 weeks enough of a break, 1 week, a month, or it just depends?
Yeah, I wish I could say there's some kids by 3 days, you clear the air and they're ready to start again. Some kids, depending on how determined they are to be autonomous, and I'm not doing this till I want to do it, maybe it's more like a month. Point being is, and it's just so easy to remember it this way, if you have this sensation, we need to pause. We need to brainstorm together with our little person to move forward with a new plan. One more, even though I went on and on about the power of praise, there is this treasure box idea where you have a bowl or a box with $1 little somethings wrapped inside, and every time the child goes through the routine, so finishing up washing hands, gets to open. Again, those little token reinforcements, rewards don't come when they pee and poop. It's about the willingness to participate.
The process. And maybe resetting up the beginning of it so that they're in a different mindset and feeling a little more empowered from the beginning. We have another question about routine, because we've been talking so much about routine. If a child's routine is drinking milk from his cup first and he's adamant about that routine, should potty come after milk or insist on potty right after he wakes up?
Okay. Well, I would prefer that this new routine be that you visit the bathroom first, because my hunch is once that little one starts drinking the milk, that sphincter muscle, my hunch is things are going to open up. What we're trying to do is to set the child up for success, to realize, holy smokes, I sat here, maybe it took a week, but I sat here and I can do this. The pee came out. So I would recommend involving that child in this new routine, maybe for this family, Lauren, taking that modeling shoot, that pictures.
And again, it's kind of stepping back and thinking about the setup, and before you start saying we're going to start potty training, maybe it's just back to we're going to start a new routine, because
we're going to,
and it's all new.
We're going to do this differently. Maybe you're going to break it down. We didn't yet get to the slide, and we can do this another time. Getting back to refusal to poop or other toilet training problems. This is just part of the process. Very few kids start at A and get to B without a couple breaks along the way.
I do want to, can we talk about refusal to poop for 1 second? Because I do think people had tons of questions about that.
Yes. So there is a wonderful technique. What I love to do or recommend as a developmentalist is to break down this process. What do I mean by this? Your little person is refusing to poop, or for some kids, it's refusal to pee. And so what you can do is say, okay, let's do this. You're in your diaper, you're in your pull up. You can pee next to the bathroom door. We're not even getting near the toilet or the potty. You do that for a week. Then we invite the child into the bathroom. Pee, poop, right there in that bathroom, not sitting on anything, still with that diaper pull up on. Then maybe the next week we invite the child to make a choice. Do you want to sit with your diaper pull up on the potty or on the toilet? Okay. Then the next thing is, if they're using the potty, there are two techniques. You can take the diaper off and literally place it in the bottom of the potty. Please don't do this with your toilet or else you'll be calling the plumber. You can put the diaper in the bottom of the potty and the little one can attempt to pee or poop on top of it. Okay. The other great technique is you keep that diaper or pull up on the child, but before you put the diaper or the pull up on, you cut a little flap in the bottom of it. Okay. So the little one feels the diaper, feels the pull up around the body, and the little person has made a choice if they're going to sit on the potty or the toilet. That can be so helpful.
And do you think the reason, because I've always been curious about this, do you think, are they scared of the actual noise of going into the body? What makes it different for them, do you think?
I think these fears and anxieties are real, right? Just like as a grown-up, we have our anxieties and fears of things. In a child's world, like you said, the sound of something splashing into the toilet. Maybe there was a day that the child was splashed from below. Maybe the sound of the toilet. Maybe they've spent the first 2.5 years of their life curled up on their side pooping, and now we're asking them to sit on top of a toilet. So if you put yourself in their shoes, that's why the idea of putting an empty diaper or pull up in the potty seat, why would that make a difference? Well, for some children, it just does.
Well, I think that's a really great, I think what we've talked about in general is breaking it down into smaller steps, both for you as a parent and for your child, to help address each phase as its own small step. And some children might go through 1 or 2 steps together, or they might be paused in step 3 for 3 months. And
Lauren, isn't that so true about so many different areas of parenting, which is such a great way to bring this all the way back around. This way of coming up with a plan, being consistent, and then responding and supporting your child in the process instead of trying to control them. It makes such a world of difference, not just around toilet training, but around a lot of areas of parenting.
This has been so fantastic, Jen. Thank you so much. I know that we had a few questions, actually I think we got to all the questions in the chat, but, and most of the questions that everyone asked beforehand, but we will be sharing a follow-up email with a resource sheet, and we'll also share the temperament guide and the quiz for people who couldn't make it today. And we just thank you again for joining us. And we will, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have upcoming events with Jen and her team, as well as others. You can check them out on vivvi.com/events. And Jen is at the Loved Child in Boston, and we'll see you all soon. So thank you so much.
Great to be here. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.